another archaeological find in 2021 that was dated August 3rd of 2021 by Ruth Schuster, posted on haaretz.com, was titled, "Has the Lost City of the Gospels Finally Been Found?" Two sites are competing for the title of the real Bethsaida. Only one can be right. One would think an El Arose does have a layer from the time of Jesus and the apostles, but there's a twist to this Galilean tale. Now they show an aerial view of El Arose showing the southern, western, and northern walls of the Byzantine Church of the Apostles and inundated squares of previous seasons with Roman period remains. Now let's get to this interesting story. Sometime between the 1st century BCE to the early 1st century, a fishing village arose where the Jordan River enters the shore of the Sea of Galilee. The name Bethsaida literally stems from that description, house of hunting, i.e., house of fishing. In the year 30 or 31 CE, Tetrarch Herod Philip upgraded the village to a polis named Julius, according to the Roman Jewish historian Josephus Flavius. Then, in the 3rd century, the historical record goes silent on Bethsaida Julius until the 5th century. Archaeology shows that is when the Byzantines built a church in the town over the putative home of the apostles Andrew and Simon Peter. And then the city's location was lost. Bethsaida is the last missing city of the Gospels, Steve Notley of Nyack College told Haaretz during a recent week-long visit to Israel. But he and Mordecai Aviam of the Kinneret Academic College of the Galilee feel quite confident they found the best candidate for identifying Bethsaida at the archaeological site called El Arose. Just over 1.25 miles to the northwest, situated a bit higher above the lake, is a site competing for the title of the real Bethsaida, Etel, which was excavated for over 3 decades by Rami Arav of the University of Nebraska, Omaha. He's also confident that he's found the real Bethsaida. And I have seen his work, and what I can say about that is it looks like a tell, like a mound, and it's quite far from what they said was the receded original level of the Sea of Galilee. So in other words, the tell is not on the shore, and the water of the Sea of Galilee is quite far away, and in the valley leading out to the water, all kinds of vegetation has grown. So it was questionable at the time whether that was the real Bethsaida. So he was excavating that for quite some time. But this is a new location that they believe, and it's right on the shore, which I believe, since Magdala was just unearthed right there near the shore of the Sea of Galilee, that this is more likely the true location. Only one location could be right, one would think. Dror Ben Yosef, state archaeologist for the Israel Nature and Parks Authority's Northern District, diplomatically suggests both are right, in a sense, and we shall get back to his opinion. On a blistering summer morning in July, Notley and Aviam were back in Arose, flooding from heavy winter rains swelling the lake, and the coronavirus had conspired to frustrate work there in 2020. Come mid-2021, as Israel lifted its COVID restrictions, only to reinstate some in late July, and as the water level receded somewhat, the archaeologists resumed work. Some pits dug in previous years remained full of algae-ridden green water. 2 teams of Kinneret College students were hard at work. One is excavating lakeside homes from the Roman period. The other is digging up the 5th century Byzantine Church previously identified at the site. They hope to find its floor. Why? We're hoping to find an inscription citing perhaps the bishop or the benefactors who financed the church's construction, Aviam explains. The hope is that this could nail down the site's identification, at least as it was perceived 5 centuries after Jesus. Of course, the Byzantine fathers could have erred in pinpointing where the apostles' homes were, but both Aviam and Notley place some, if not overwhelming, trust in the local traditions. The story of Arose's excavation starts with the construction of an Ottoman manse called Bet Habek, House of the Bey. In the 19th century, it had been built by Abdul al-Rahman Basha al-Yusuf, the local Bek Pasha, on top of ancient ruins. Yusuf controlled the marshy and mosquito-ridden land around that part of the lake, allowing it to be farmed by Jews, and in about 1930, the German priest Rudolf de Haas found an ancient mosaic 2 meters below the level of Bet Habek's foundations. In 1948, Syria captured some lands around the Sea of Galilee, including the mansion, and held them until the Six-Day War in 1967. The Syrians used Bet Habek as an outpost, but in 1955, Israeli paratroopers shelled it, Aviam explains. Some weathered parts remained standing, but Bet Habek was never rebuilt. To the professed regret of the archaeologists today, he would have appreciated shelter from the blistering valley sun, but such is life. In any case, the memory of the mosaic, 2 meters lower than Bet Habek, lingered. What de Haas saw were the mosaic floors likely belonging to the Byzantine Church, even though he mistakenly called them Roman mosaics. Notley explains, and when he and Aviam began excavating the site in 2016, they found ornate gilded glass tesserae, tiles typical of wall ornamentation in ornate Byzantine churches, Notley explains. So even before finding the church walls, which they did, they suspected they were at the site of the church written about by the 8th century Saint Willibald, Notley says. One key argument posed by the champions of Arose as Bethsaida is the Hodoporicon, the itinerary of that pilgrim, Saint Willibald, aka Willibrord, in the Holy Land. He tells of walking from Capernaum, that's now Kfar Nahum, to Chorazin, or Kursi, via the Church of the Apostles in Bethsaida. Notley, a historian, explains what he believes we can and cannot make of that. Let us start with his and Aviam's certitude that they have a Byzantine church dating to the 5th century. Archaeologist Akai Cohn Tavor, a member of the Kinneret Institute for Galilean Archaeology, explains that in contrast to faith, architecture isn't ephemeral. We have hard evidence, he says. Byzantine basilicas were oriented east-west, which is the case here. And the archaeologists can identify the bases of some of the church pillars as well as remains of an arcade and the nave. The only part missing today is the east wall, he notes, adding that the church had been medium in size, about 15 meters wide. They have the mosaic and pieces of masonry with engraved crosses, some made of white marble imported from Marmara. The church evidently had a set of luxury marble fixtures, Cohn Tavor posits. Not much of that marble remained because most of it was probably burned to make lime at a later time, Aviam explains. Someone may have quarried the ancient church, he quips. Aviam and Notley believe they have found the lost church of the apostles erected around 5 centuries after the apostles lived. Who knows, centuries after their death, where their houses had been. Maybe there were other churches along Willibald's path. The archaeologists do not claim the church was really built on what had been the real homes of the apostles, but they have some faith in local legends, Notley says, and he feels quite confident it is the Church of the Apostles and no other, based partly on Willibald's report and partly on the absence of other candidates. The competing site, the Tell, is a stunning Iron Age city and possibly the capital of the biblical kingdom of Gesher, but no substantial Roman lair or church have been found there to date. Notley and Aviam say their clincher, however, isn't based on faith, but mud. The archaeologists have identified a Roman lair from the 1st to 3rd century CE, and above that is a layer of silt 2 meters thick, and above that is the Byzantine layer with the church from the 5th to 8th century CE. Boy, that sounds pretty exciting and convincing. What does that 2-meter thick layer of mud sandwiched between Roman ruins below and Byzantine ruins above indicate? The Roman ruins indicate that a small polis had indeed arisen there. The silt indicates that in the 3rd century the lake rose for whatever reason and the site was inundated. It was abandoned for 200 years, Aviam says. Then it was resettled in the 5th century until being abandoned once and for all in the 8th century. Indeed, from the 3rd to the 5th century, historical references to Bethsaida go silent, Notley points out. Now the archaeologists have found an archaeological gap fitting that hole in the record, supporting the contention that the site had been a polis, albeit a wee one. The Roman layer below the mud includes the remains of a bathhouse, as any self-respecting Roman settlement would have had. That is the only edifice featuring monumental construction found at Arose so far, but the archaeologists have also found private homes from the Roman period in 3 different places. They checked around the site where they found not only pottery and coins, but glassware and fragments of delicately painted frescoes. It begs adding that only a fraction of the site has been explored so far. Rather than hastily uncovering more ground, the team is concentrating on reaching the floor of the church, as said. The rest can be excavated in another season, budgets willing. The competing site at Tell may have even been, as Arab postulates, the capital of Gesher. But during the Roman period, it was in decline, Aviam explains, nor was Tell situated on the lake shore as a fishing village would be, but on a hill. And just like Magdala is on the shoreline, and it's known as a fishing village. Arave, Tell's excavator, and the proprietor of the theory that Tell was Bethsaida, suggests that the inhabitants fished from a lagoon that reached the city's southwest edge when the lake was high. But if this was the case, the Roman period Jewish village and small polis were under 2 meters of water, Aviam says. If Notley and Aviam are correct that Arose is the one and true Bethsaida that was turned into the polis Julius, then they should find a lot more than a church, the bathhouse and some private homes and glass from the Roman period, and indeed they may if and when the excavation is widened. My training as a historian and in historical geography addresses how well historical sources match the physical contours of the land. And one of the questions that I had to deal with was the site of Bethsaida, the last missing lost city of the Gospels, Notley sums up. The reports on Tell don't seem suited to the descriptions of people who had walked the streets of Bethsaida in the New Testament, or descriptions in writings by Josephus or rabbinic references, which also go silent on the subject in the 3rd century, Notley explains. Tell does have Hellenistic remains, but those were 200-300 years earlier than the Roman period, he adds, by which time the city at Tell apparently went into decline, which is the opposite of being upgraded into a polis, albeit possibly a wee one, not likely the mighty Hippos or Bet Shean that were members of the Decapolis. Also, it's too far from the lake, Notley adds, and I would have to agree with that, because there was quite a distance from the tell to the edge of the water of the lake of the Sea of Galilee. Notley adds and repeats, to fish from Tell, the lake would have to be a few meters higher, which would put every settlement around the lake underwater. Why then does the Israeli government recognize Tell as Bethsaida? Aviam points out that when that was done in the 1990s, it was the only candidate, and Arave touted it as the place and challenged the archaeological community to find another one. Well, that's been done. It's not easy to have a better candidate, Aviam laughs. Publication is in process, and meanwhile, their site fits the facts better. In his view, nothing can change the fact that they found a Roman period from the 1st century, the time of the apostles, with a bathhouse suitable to a polis supported by coins and pottery from the time. They found the Roman period homes. What they haven't found is the rest of the polis, but that could come. And by the way, why would the Tetrarch Herod Philip have upgraded the village into a polis? Aviam notes that leaders like to build new cities that they can name after the wonder that is themselves, or in flattery of their overlord. In this case, Bethsaida was renamed Julius in honor of Julia Augusta of the royal family. Anyway, if the finds are from the 1st century, that suggests the village was very new when the apostles reportedly lived there. It could be so, Aviam agrees. We knew Jewish villages were established between the 1st century BCE to the 1st century CE, or continued excavation could find earlier finds from the Hellenistic period, and hopefully the theater from the Roman period. No self-respecting Roman town would be without one. Dror ben Yosef, the archaeologist for the Parks Authority's Northern District, personally thinks Aviam, Notley, and Rami Arav are all right, just for different periods. First of all, he points out that a lot of mistakes have been made when identifying ancient settlements. Harosheth Hagoim, Sisera's fortress, according to the book of Judges, has been identified several times in both Israel and Lebanon. The settlement of Kiryat Haroshet was even founded on the basis of an erroneous location. As for Bethsaida, Arav argues that his Tell site is the best candidate for the biblical era city named Tser, mentioned in the book of Joshua, as belonging to the tribe of Naphtali. How is that? Tser began Betser, which begat Bethser, which begat Bethsed, which turned into Bethsaida. Isn't that interesting? My publisher's last name is Tser. Can you believe that? Wow, that gives me the goosebumps. Just unbelievable. And that's not a name you hear every day either. Ben Yosef agrees that's possible because Zer and Zed may stem from the same root, TZD, which means hunting or fishing. The city of Tyre in Lebanon, Sur, in the local lingo, also stems from the same root, Ben Yosef points out. But when discussing Roman period Bethsaida, Julius ben Yosef feels Aviam and Notley have the winning case with Arage. Place names can move, he points out. He also hopes that peace can be brought to the subject of which is the real Bethsaida. So Tell has the trappings of the Iron Age Bethsaida, Tser, and Arage has the ruins suitable to the Roman period Bethsaida, period. Let's see what Aviam and Notley find when the church floor is revealed. And why might Israeli government websites still tell as the real Bethsaida when, at the least, the question is open? For one thing, Aviam excavation is fairly new. Just a few years, so the government still has to wrap its head around the possibility of a competing site. And for another, the foreign ministry page on the topic is from 2000. It apparently hasn't been updated since. As often happens in archaeology, both sets of archaeologists are right, and both could be wrong, the Israeli Antiquities Authority said in a statement, clarifying that the state of Israel has not taken a position on where the real Bethsaida might be. The bottom line is there's no bottom line yet, but the issue bears revisiting in years to come as the excavations advance, the IAA stated. It added that it hesitates to recognize the identity of any given archaeological site because new discoveries tend to supplant old definitions and identifications. That is totally incredible that that town's name originally in the Bible was Zer, T-Z-E-R. It just blows my mind completely that that's the last name of my publisher. The name of what that city was in the Bible. Not only that, her company is olivepresspublisher.com. So the Olive Press is just all about the Messiah and the distress that he went under like he was an olive in a press at his crucifixion and just before he was crucified, the torment that he went through. Bet you anything they have found the true site of Bethsaida. And wouldn't it be so amazing if there's some evidence inside some of the Roman period homes that they have found, if they found evidence that this is where the disciples' homes were. And that's something that could definitely be unearthed in the near future when they expand and widen this archaeological site to be more than just looking for the church floor from the Byzantine era. Because the name Bethsaida has the meaning of house of hunting or fishing, house of fishing, it would be right there on the coast, just like Magdala. The synagogue of Mary Magdalene is right there on the shore. And this is what they have located right on the shore that they believe is the true Bethsaida, the home of a couple of the disciples of Jesus, the Messiah of Israel. So before I end this incredible story, let me just show you some of the Israeli Antiquities Authority's photographs of the true site of Bethsaida. I truly believe in my heart that they have found the real place. So you've got to take a look at these incredible pictures that the IAA posted, and I give them copyright credit for their work for these photographs. The first picture that they posted was the aerial of El Arose, showing the southern, western, and northern walls of the Byzantine Church of the Apostles and inundated squares of previous seasons with Roman period remains. Credit for this picture goes to Akia Cohn Tavor. You can see the Sea of Galilee is over there to the left, and we're looking down on the archaeological discovery, remains of buildings. And then, of course, you can see the excavations right down there from this aerial view. This one says that after heavy winter rains, that the Sea of Galilee flooded this area. Credit goes to Professor Mordecai Aviam. And here they're showing you where the tell is, and you can see that's the excavation that they've been doing for quite a few years. And you can see how far away from the shoreline it is, where Arose is right there on the shoreline, just like the city of Magdala, which is now called Migdal. If you'll notice on this map where Capernaum is, where Jesus was living, it makes more sense, the Arose location, to be Bethsaida, right there on the shore. Jesus would have been all around this area, and that is exciting. This says gold-gilded glass from the Church of the Apostles. This is the mosaic floor from the Roman period bathhouse. You can read what it says there at the bottom of the photograph. This is Dr. Stephen Notley and his daughter Catherine removing portions from the Roman period mosaics. And this is a piece of the decorative marble from the Byzantine Church. This is one of the lead fishing weights found at Arose, indicative of local fishing industry. This is Yahashua Dre measuring the depth of the bathhouse mosaics at minus 211 meters. And this is the aerial view, the putative site of Bethsaida before it flooded last year. This could actually be where the disciples were living. Isn't this exciting? Because they're going to continue to excavate that, and no telling what they're going to find. Just basically finding that marble piece that went into the church, to me, that shows that that's more likely the site than the tell, because the marble is showing that the church was actually in that location, and the churches were always built over the monumental sites that had to do with Jesus or his disciples, the apostles of Christ. And this was some of their hometown. So it's truly exciting. And to see that Jesus was living in Capernaum, which is just right, a little ways up the road, is very telling to me that the Arose site would be the true Bethsaida. So it's very thrilling. You're not going to believe this, but I went to look up the scripture, and the Bible has been removed from my phone. I wonder when that happened, and I did not remove it. So I'm going to look up a scripture for you, and you'll have to give me a moment to do that. All right, well, my battery just ran out, so I'm praying I get this read. But in John 1, in verse 35, it says, "Again the next day, John the Baptist stood with two of his disciples, and looking at Jesus as he walked, he said, 'Behold, the Lamb of God.' The two disciples heard him speak, and they followed Jesus. And then Jesus turned, and seeing them following, said to them, 'What do you seek?' And they said to him, 'Rabbi,' which is to say, when translated, teacher, 'where are you staying?' And he said to them, 'Come and see.' They came and saw where he was staying, and remained with him that day. Now it was about the 10th hour. One of the two who heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his own brother Simon and said to him, 'We have found the Messiah.' And he brought him to Jesus. Now when Jesus looked at him, he said, 'You are Simon, the son of Jonah. You shall be called Cephas.' The following day, Jesus wanted to go to Galilee, and he found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Simon Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." And Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him and said of him, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" And Jesus answered and said to him, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." Nathanael answered and said to him, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." And Jesus answered and said to him, "Because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Most assuredly I say to you, hereafter you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." So basically, the disciples that lived in Bethsaida, they basically followed the Messiah, and he was living over there in Capernaum. So they followed him there and spent the day with him. But we find something else, a real exciting miracle happened in Bethsaida. Now this happened right after he performed another miracle of the loaves of bread where he multiplied them. And this is Mark 8, verse 22. "And he cometh to Bethsaida, and they bring a blind man unto him, and besought him to touch him. And he took the blind man by the hand, and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes, and put his hands upon him, he asked him if he saw aught. And he looked up and said, I see men as trees walking. After that he put his hands again upon his eyes, and made him look up. And he was restored, and saw every man clearly. And he sent him away to his house, saying, Neither go into the town, nor tell it to any in the town. So Jesus came to Bethsaida, and he took this blind man out of the town, and healed him. And he saw the tree of life standing before him. Such a miracle. And then he told him not to go back into the town and tell anyone. You think that he did that? That's just one of Jesus' many miracles. And just to know that he was in that area, and that he came to Bethsaida and took this blind man out and healed him outside of the town, and told him not to tell anyone in the town, is pretty incredible. And you may be actually looking at the very town in the aerial view taken by the Israeli Antiquities Authority and all of these people that are doing the excavations there in the place right by the shore of the Sea of Galilee. I sure hope that these incredible finds from the year 2021 are a huge blessing to your heart. And it's just an incredible thing that fills my heart with joy to know that the Messiah was walking in that area and healed somebody from that town. You can see very clearly how close to the shore it is, which is right there on the left-hand side. And then the remains of the archaeological discoveries are right there. One of the coolest archaeological finds of 2021.